In looking at what we do, the future of financial markets is definitely not predictable, as we've seen so far this year, but there's something with the potential to impact us financially in a much worse way than even a bear market. And unlike the markets, however, this threat is predictable. And in many situations, we have the individual power to stop it. Financial loss from cybercrime and identity theft. So while the financial markets have ups and downs, cybercrime and the financial losses that come with it are on a steep and steady incline with no evidence of slowing down. So this year, the cost of cybercrime will reach over $6 trillion, huge business. So this represents the greatest transfer of economic wealth in world history. So people living here in the United States continue to be the most frequent target and incur the most financial loss, falling victim to fraudsters, both domestic and international. So us, both David and myself, as your financial advisors, we want to help you achieve your life goals. And that includes providing you with the education on ways to make you and your family safe from threats such as these. So today's session will teach you how to make your attack surface much smaller and provide you with practical ways to identify attempts by cyber criminals and fraudsters to gain access to your money and prevent you from becoming a victim. So our guest speaker, without any further ado, Jared Hoffman is a managing director at Buckingham Strategic Wealth. He's a partner relationship of our firm. And part of Jared's role includes educating firms and clients on best practices around cybersecurity with an emphasis on the behavioral aspect. And so Jared is also a member of InfraGard, a partnership between the FBI, that's pretty cool, and public/private sector, created to share information and trends on cybercrime, tactics, and defenses. So please welcome Jared Hoffman.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks for having me here today. As Justin said, we're really not going to be talking about technology much today. We're going to be talking about how do you protect yourself, and you're not going to have to go out and buy a bunch of fancy software when this webinar is over. It's really going to be about what are some easy things you could literally do in the next 24 hours. So while you are definitely free to take some notes today, Justin and his team are going to be sending out to you afterwards some of the main talking points and some of the resources we talk about today. First of all, I want to just talk about a couple I consider the myths that are out there that we always hear about. One is that if I'm someone who's older, let's say over the age of 60, although I don't think that's very old anymore, I'm much more likely to fall for a cyber scam than someone who's in their 20s. So that is definitely a myth. About a year ago, you may have seen the Milk Crate Challenge. This to me was almost a form of phishing, and you had people, mostly younger people, trying to climb over milk crates. And not only did they kind of fail at it, but they actually posted themselves on video doing this. Okay, I think while they didn't lose any money, they maybe lost a little bit of pride. You'll sometimes hear about if you're going to be safe online, you have to really understand how technology works. Again, I think that's also a myth. You don't have to have a deep understanding of this stuff. Here's someone that understands how to take a photo, how to post a photo on the internet, but the science of sockets and plugs, is still a little bit vague for them. Okay, I think most of us know how to plug something in. And then finally, if you're going to navigate the internet and these different apps that are out there, you've got to be extremely smart to do this. This is one of my favorites. There was a total eclipse about, was that 4 years ago, I believe? I actually got to see it. It was really awesome. We came to the Midwest. Here's someone who posted on Facebook asking, could the solar eclipse be postponed to the weekend when their kids would have a better opportunity to watch it? So I think we can say those are all myths, and you don't have to be smart to do this stuff. In fact, everyone here, by even attending, I'd say you've already got an awareness that this is an issue. And today we're going to teach you some of the ways that you can keep yourself safe. First, we're going to talk briefly about who are the targets. Probably nobody on this call is the #1 target, but it is probably someone that you really care about. And that is your kid, could be a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, a kid who's a family friend, something like that. Kids are the #1 target of identity thieves. And the reason for that is because they have something a lot of adults do not have: perfectly pristine credit. Okay. And therefore, if a cyber identity thief can get hold of a kid's social security number and use their credit, they love it. They're off to the races. And when a creditor is looking at a social security number, they cannot tell, does this social belong to a 7-month-old or a 77-year-old? They have no idea. The only thing that creditor can do is validate, is this a valid, true social security number? So a lot of times what will happen is the fraudster will get a hold of that early on and start using that kid's credit. A lot of times as a parent, we're not monitoring our kids' credit, right? They don't have any credit. But it turns out sometimes they do because cyber thieves are already using it and basically ruining it. So what are some things you can be aware of? Some tips that something's going wrong. The biggest one we see is if your kid gets like a Visa card offer in the mail, and at first it even seems cute, right? Little Billy is getting his first Visa card offer at the age of 2, but it's actually a really bad sign. That means that someone has probably opened up credit in his name. That information gets shared, and then other people want him to open up more credit. So that's a big red flag. If they get, you get a notice from the IRS that they've already filed their taxes or their information is already on another tax return, major red flag. If a debt collection agency calls or a job verification for them calls, it may not be the wrong number. It may be because someone's already using their identity. You do have some things at your disposal to stop this and prevent this from happening. A big one right off the bat that everyone in this call can do in the next 24 hours is try to get a credit report for your child. And you should get nothing back. And you should do it for all three, for Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. And if you do get something back, even if it's that your child has great credit, that's really bad because they should have no credit. You should literally not even get a report back. You should get nothing back. Things you can also do to prevent this are things such as that little blue Social Security card that they receive. Instead of keeping that in your wallet or purse, I would lock that up somewhere because if your wallet or purse gets stolen, now the cyber thief or that thief could have their identity and start using it. I'd be careful about giving their information out. I went to register my niece for baseball this summer. And when I was filling out the form, it had things on there like what's her name, her address, what position does she want to play, what's her favorite number, what is her social security number. And I left that line blank. When I turned the form in, I asked the guy, I said, I'm going to leave this one blank. Is there a reason you guys need her social? He goes, oh, I don't know. We just got this form online. So they weren't even sure why they were even asking for it. And I certainly don't think I could trust them to keep that safe. So I think it's okay to question that. And then as your kids get older, when they get in, past the age of 10, help them understand that is not something they should ever give out. It shouldn't be their locker combination. It's not something they should try to enter in exchange for some kind of an offer online. A lot of thieves will go after teenagers trying to get this information. But the best weapon you have right now is you can freeze your child's credit. This happened 3 years ago through federal legislation. You freeze your child's credit. It will expire when they become an adult, and that varies from state to state, 16, 17, 18, and then they can freeze it as an adult. But what that will do is prevent, if someone got a hold of their social, no one would be able to actually use it to open up credit. I didn't realize how bad this was until I met a couple at an event I was doing whose teenage son went to buy his first car, and he was denied credit, which is unusual because credit card companies love teenagers. He had $800,000 of debt in his name. So think about the impact that could have on your child. They could be denied jobs and not be told why. They could be denied, a place to live later on. They could be denied all sorts of things. So this is a really important thing that you can do to protect your kids. Second biggest group, and Froster's favorite season just ended, and that's tax season. US taxpayers are one of the biggest targets in this space. And while tax season has just ended, they're still going to be going after people. I'd say the biggest thing to remember here is that the IRS is never going to call you, text you, or email you. This is still the methods the fraudsters use most. Oftentimes, these are very threatening calls, like you're going to be going to jail because you did not pay the right amount in taxes, or we never received your return. And for whatever reason, the IRS cops are always about 40 minutes away when we hear about these calls. So just remember that. They're never going to do these things. They're never going to threaten you. I know none of us probably really love the IRS, but they're not going to threaten you. And I would just hang up that phone, delete that text message. And if you have concerns, call the IRS at the number that you know it to be. So I would call that blanket coverage, right? We talked about kids, taxpayers. That's blanket coverage, right? That's who they're going after. Next, we're going to talk about what actually happens to your identity. Today, the average identity is only worth about $12, which is a little depressing. I like to think we're worth a little bit more than that. And that's actually an increase from about $8 of a couple of years ago. So there is a lot of demand out there. But the reason it's not worth more is because there is so much supply out there. And $12 is a case of old Milwaukee, by the way. I think maybe it's not even worth that, right? And as someone who likes a cold beer in the weekend, it's a little depressing to think that's all I'm worth, but that it is. So what happens to our identities? Oftentimes they wind up on the dark web. What is that? So the World Wide Web, think of that as the sites you guys go to all the time. You want to see, hey, what's the weather going to be this weekend? You go to weather.com. What's the Yankees or Mets score? You know, I think they're both have the two best records in baseball right now. You go at ESPN.com, right? These are sites you don't have to log into. You can go out there and see what's going on. Below there is another layer called the deep web. The deep web is sites that we go to a lot, but they do require login. It could be a medical portal. It could be a client portal that you have to access information. Maybe your work site has an intranet, things like that. The information on those sites requires a login. It's not going to show up on a Google search engine, the content within there. But the very lower layer there is what we call the dark web. The dark web contains things like child pornography, drug trafficking, and so a big piece of this is selling stolen identities. So we got to go out on the dark web one night through the FBI, and the first question we asked was, why don't you guys just shut the dark web down if you know what's out there? And you really can't, because it's fully encrypted, and getting out there is legal to go out there. Now, what you do once you're out there could be illegal, but it's tough to get out there. You have to have a special type of browser. It's called TOR, and you have to know what you're doing once you're out there. Unlike the World Wide Web, the dark web is not really searchable, but we are going to show you kind of what's out there and what's happening. So these are actual screenshots of dark web areas. So here's one that sells people's stolen identities, right? I think this looks a lot like eBay, by the way. But instead of buying furniture or books or baseball cards, I'm buying somebody's social security card. And sometimes these things sell for as little as $1, okay? And if you look on there, you can see the views are massive. So there's not just 100,000 people out on the dark web. There are millions of people out there looking at this stuff. Here's a site that is selling stolen Yahoo passwords. So not every data breach, by the way, winds up in the news, especially smaller companies, but these big ones typically will. When Yahoo has a big breach, we read about it. Marriott, Home Depot, some of those big ones we've heard about. I would always recommend going in and changing and updating your information, even if it looks okay, because your password may wind up in the dark web, not at the time you're checking it out, but it could be 2 hours later, 2 months, sometimes even 2 years later. And if you haven't taken that next step, you can see your information out here. They're also really running this like a marketplace. So when you go on the dark web, you will see things like, we guarantee satisfaction. How can they do that, right? If I buy a stolen credit card and that doesn't work when I go to use it, I can't exactly go to the police and say, hey, I bought a stolen credit card and I need you to prosecute these guys because it didn't work. But actually what's going to happen is I'm going to go back to that dark web marketplace and say, hey, I bought this from you guys and I wasn't able to use it. They're probably going to give me a new one or refund my money. Why would they do that? Because they don't want to have a bad reputation. They want me to come back and buy more stuff. They offer 24/7 customer service. That's hard to get from your cable company, right? Or so your internet providers. Free trials. Hey, we will hack 10,000 accounts. We'll do the first 10 for free to prove to you we know what we're doing. And then this is so upside down. You will see words out there like honesty and integrity. We are hackers you can trust to do the bad thing. We hire the best people. Go with us. Who are these cyber hackers, right? Who are these cyber villains? When I think of cyber villains, I think of the classic villains, right? They're enshrouded in black. They wear masks. I'm a Cardinals fan from St. Louis. You can substitute your own sports favorite logo in there, right? That's what I think of as classic villains. But cyber villains, they're not that kid in their parents' basement that we have that stereotypical picture of, hunkered over a computer writing code, right? These are pictures of actual cyber villains. And I think these folks in these photos, to me, look exactly like somebody I could live next door to, pass by on the street. They're very average looking people. They're very social. They've got a very good skill set. And while they may not be violent, they are extremely dangerous because they do not discriminate. They don't care if they take $1,000 from a billionaire or they take $1,000 from someone who's living off Social Security. They don't care. They want your money, and they are pretty ruthless about it. So how do you recognize these threats? How do you stop these people that are targeting us? So we're going to show you the methods that they're using and how you can recognize them, because your brain and your gut instincts is really one of the best weapons you have. And obviously that doesn't cost you anything. You just have to activate it. So the number one method that fraudsters use is what they call social engineering. And that's where they get us to do things we normally would not do. If I went up to David on the street and he didn't know me and we crossed paths and I said, hey, excuse me, can I have your password and ID for your email? There's zero chance he's going to give that to me. And he may even, give me a crossword there, right? But if I call someone at their place of work and I say, hi, I'm Jared, I just got hired in IT, we're under cyber attack, I need to get into your email right away. Are you going to give me your password? I'd say there's a good chance you will, because I put you in a very different circumstance. I know you're loyal to the company. I know you want to help, and I'm not giving you any time to think about it. And a lot of these social engineering attempts are going to do things like that. They're not going to give you time, and they're going to use emotions against you. So we're going to show you some quick examples here. Phishing is still the #1 attempt because they can send one email out to hundreds of thousands of people. So here's one that I received about a year ago from PayPal. A lot of people use PayPal to pay for things, right? And there's a couple grammatical errors in here, by the way, like we've detected in your informations. Bad grammar can always be a sign that something is fishy, but a lot of times now things are perfectly worded. Maybe they're using their profits on better spell checkers and grammatical people. So just because something's perfectly worded doesn't mean it's true. But what they're trying to do is they're using emotions against me. My account has been suspended. That is going to create anxiety. But I can get it activated by updating my information. I'm going to click on this blue button. I'm going to go to a site that looks just like PayPal, enter my information, and now I have given my information over to the identity thieves. Here's another one I received. This one was interesting. I got this one at work also. And we have software at Buckingham, and I know that Premier does as well, that looks for different threats that are out there, right? So I got an email from Chase. I have a Southwest Visa Chase card. And right off the bat, there were a couple things that kind of threw me. Well, one, it got my attention because it said my account was being discontinued. And I have one credit card. So that got my attention. But it said things like urgent action required. How urgent can something be if it's being done via email? That's always a tip off to me. And then when I started looking at these links and hovering over them without clicking on them, I could see that they weren't really either. They weren't links at all, or they were taking me to weird places. A link can say anything. Doesn't mean it's where it's going to take you. So I knew that this one was fake. Why did I get this email though, if we've got all this software? Because there are no viruses on this email. They're just trying to get me to go to a fake website and put in my credentials. And so while all of you at your homes probably have some form of anti-malware, spyware, antivirus software, keep that in mind. They can't protect you from emails like this. Here's one that Justin sent me. So businesses get targeted all the time. And whether you're at your own personal life where you're doing, transactions on the internet, but also businesses have to really be careful of this stuff and have the right things in there to be aware of what's going on. They do this through text now. I've been in financial services for 18 years, but I'm not an advisor, but I have learned that businesses that cannot find your account number are bad banks. That is not a bank you want to do business with, right? This is a pretty weak attempt. Although this bank has some awesome hours. If you work the night shift, they're open apparently at 3:30 in the morning. It's a pretty weak attempt, but you know what? They send out 10,000 texts and someone's kind of half asleep when they get this. Oh my gosh, the bank doesn't have my account number. I need to go, I got to do some transactions tomorrow. I bet they got a couple hits. This is a much better attempt where they're using both texting and phone. So again, it's social engineering. My Wells Fargo account has been locked. I'm going to call this number and suddenly I find out someone's going to answer and say, yes, we did have to lock your account, but I can help you out. Please give me your account information. I'll hear typing in the background. Yes, Jared, we've unlocked your account. Do you need anything else? I say no. I go to check my Wells Fargo account. Sure, I can get in, but it was never locked in the first place. Okay, they got me to take action right away and think I was being helped. I'm sure some of you on the call have received these things from your computer has a virus, or someone will call you from Microsoft saying your computer is broken. No one knows what's going on with your computer. So whenever you see these type of alerts, which are going to again create a lot of anxiety, oh my gosh, right? Close that window. And if you're not sure, take your PC, your laptop, your phone to someone that you trust. Don't click on these links. Don't give someone access to help you fix your computer. Those are always big red flags. Now, during the pandemic, one of the shows I got addicted to was Judge Judy. I just liked the way that she talked. I liked her philosophy on things. And as a Judge Judy fan, I found out there's all these Judyisms that are out there. Some of these are great, I think. Beauty fades, dumb is forever. Last week, I used this against my nephew. He was cheating in Battleship, and I said to him, if you have a good memory, you can tell the truth. But this one really applies to what we're talking about here today. If something doesn't make sense, it isn't true. So when you see some of these attempts against you, think about that. Does this make sense to me? If it doesn't make sense, don't click on it. Don't take action. Take that next step and go to a site that you think, or call someone that you trust. Don't feel like you have to do something right away. We're going to talk really briefly and do an interactive exercise here called the Mandela Effect. Some of you may have heard of this. This was named after Nelson Mandela. A researcher discovered that the majority of people in the United States thought Nelson Mandela went to prison in South Africa and died there as a hero, but he actually was released and became president of South Africa. And she was trying to understand, why do people think this? If you go and Google search this, there's all sorts of theories. Some people think there's a rip in the space-time continuum and then there's parallel universes going on. You can decide for yourself. I think it just shows our memories sometimes can get a little funky. So here's an example of this. If I showed you this scene from the movie Snow White and I said, what does the evil queen say here? Myself, and I think most of you would say, mirror, mirror on the wall. But if you go back and watch that on Disney Plus, you'll see it's magic mirror on the wall. So we'll do this as a quick exercise. I have only seen about 5 people get through this out of 1,200. We've done this at different events. I'm going to show you a classic logo of an item that you're very familiar with, and you just have to guess which one is correct. And I'll point out the difference. It's not like the color's off by 1 degree or something, okay? Kit Kat's a top 3 selling candy bar. If you want to put your answer in the chat, you can feel free to do that. Which one is correct though? Is Kit Kat hyphenated like number 1, or is it not hyphenated like number 2? Okay, if you said number 1, we'd ask you to sit down if we were doing this in person, because Kit Kat is not hyphenated. This is the game that I think causes more family arguments than anybody, right? Monopoly, Rich Uncle Penny Bags. Which is the correct logo? Is it 1 or 2? In number 1, he does not have a monocle. In number 2, he has a monocle. Which one do you think is right? And if you said number 1, you'd still be standing. He does not have a monocle. Almost everyone misses this one. I think we associate a monocle with wealth. Ford logo. Does the F in Ford have a little curly Q pigtail through the F, or is it more of a straight line? It has the curly Q, which people miss this one all the time. I think we think of Ford as tough and macho, and the idea that it has this little cute pigtail doesn't make sense, but it's true. And another thing that got me through the pandemic was Cheez-Its. But is it Cheez-Its or is it Cheez-It? I missed this one because I call them Cheez-Its, but it's not, it's Cheez-It. So the point of that exercise is just to kind of show you that our minds can play tricks on us. And a lot of people will say, I will always recognize fake websites. I would argue you will not. Our minds can play tricks on us. Sugar can look just like salt. So don't click on links that take you to fake websites. Instead, open up your browser, go to the site that you know it to be. Don't trust links especially from unknown senders. Another common defense that you have, we're just going to spend a minute on this, is having good passwords. This is our number 1 weakness. If you have a weak password, if it's simple, if you're using the same password over and over, you've got the house made out of straw. If you got really good password management skills, you've got the house of brick. These are the most common passwords being used this year. I know it seems hard to believe, but it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password. We see these all the time. I recommend using password management software to manage this stuff. We'll send you some information out in a follow-up email. I use Dashlane personally. It's been a life changer for me. I know 1 password. I know my password to Dashlane. All my passwords are different now. I check every month to see what my health score is. It's usually at 99. Maybe I have to update 1 thing. It'll even send me alerts when there's been a breach somewhere. Another tool that you have will send out information about is 2-factor authentication. I would highly recommend this for your social media accounts, for your banking and financial institution accounts. This is where, in addition to logging in, you're going to be sent a 4-digit code to your phone or something similar like that. So if someone ever got your password, not only would they have to have your password, they'd actually have to have your physical phone device. It's not a silver bullet. Anything's possible, but it's much, much less likely. These are 4 things all of us hate to do, right? The dishes, take out the garbage, cut the lawn, update our phones, and we get those little alerts. Depending on your spouse, Maybe getting those other things updated is more important, but I would really prioritize updating your phone, because when we get these things about updating it, it's because they have identified a security hole that they're now patching. So while you may not be able to do it in the middle of the day when we get those warnings and we're in the middle of business activities, make sure you don't wait a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, and you've got this vulnerability sitting out there. I'm a journalism major. Okay, so I had to take a math class when I went to school at Indiana University. This was my approach to math class. Cross my fingers, right? That is not a good approach to preventing identity theft. Things like LifeLock, some of these other ID theft services are better than nothing, but they're very reactive. They're going to let you know what's already happened. Your best weapon here is a credit freeze, and we'll send information on how to do it. It takes about 20 minutes. It's going to prevent anybody, including yourself, from opening up new credit without unfreezing it. So when you go to unfreeze it, if you're going to buy a new car, you can call the dealership and say, hey, I'm interested in coming down, buying a new car. What credit bureau do you work with? You can unfreeze it for that one bureau. After they have a chance to run the credit report, you'll be able to go back and freeze it. So we went through a lot of things quickly here, but just to kind of recap here, you know, anything that's asking you to take immediate action, red flag, take a stop, take a breath, trust your gut instincts, right? If it doesn't make sense, it isn't true. Don't click on links from unknown senders. Keep your devices, your phones, your computers, your laptops updated. Use a password manager. You know, we'll set out information on some different options. Do two-factor authentication and do a credit freeze, especially for your kids. One final thing to take away, there are 2 red flags of scams. All scams have these, whether it's a super basic, simple, not well thought out scam like the Prince of Nigeria asking for $1 million, to a scam that is very complex and sophisticated. One or both of these things are going to happen. You're going to be asked for money, and when you're asked for money, and it may not be right away, but when you are, it's going to be urgent. And you're going to be asked for personal information. When either of these 2 things happen in some kind of a transaction correspondence, whether it's online, not online, that should raise your antenna every time. So your best defense against cybercrime, I don't want to scare people off the internet, although this looks a little relaxing, I'll admit. The internet is an awesome thing. It provides a lot of great things for us, and it changes the way that we live. Your best defense really is you. Justin and his team have a lot of things in place to protect you, different procedures, different steps, different software, but it really does start with us. We have to take kind of some responsibility here. But again, there's a lot of things you can do that you do not need to be a tech expert on. And if you can do some of the things you talked about today, are you going to make your attack surface 0? No, nobody can do that. We can't prevent our data from getting hacked in a big breach, but we can really shrink down our target size. So I'm going to turn it back over to Justin. We may have time for a couple of questions. I really appreciate everyone's time today, and I hope you came away with just a couple things you can do. And again, you'll get some follow-up information from Justin and his team.
Wow, Jared. Thank you so much for that. That was like a big funnel of information. And I even have some action steps to do. I've got 4-month-old twins at home that I need to go now and freeze their credit to make sure that nobody's opening up credit in their name. Also, password managers, if you're not using one, we use one here in the office that helps us. Definitely recommend that. The 2-factor authentication, more and more websites are even requiring that. And so definitely I love that takeaway from that. And then updating the phone. I try to do it, but it's always a pain in the butt, especially during the middle of the day. I feel like we're on our devices so often that even having it, do its reset for 20 minutes, but just to be cognizant, it's an update, and it's update for a reason. Incredible. I think those are really key takeaways from this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, Jared. We will hop into some questions, but first, before that, I do want to tease next month's speaker for June. And it is going to be our very own David Balin, who's going to be talking on long-term care planning. And someone turning the age of 65 today has almost a 70% chance of needing some type of those services and support in their remaining years. And the average cost this is nationwide, is about $9,000 a month for a private room. So it's even more here located up in the Northeast. So this is a huge expense. It's going to happen to a lot of people. What can you do to prepare for it? And the answer is not always insurance. So there's some other strategies and ways that you can utilize it. So very excited to have David on next time. So if you've got questions for Jared, put them in the chat. We'll be able to try to answer some of those. But that's incredible. So we'll have Jared information on how to freeze a credit at each of the three bureaus. We'll send that out to everybody.
Yeah, I've done it again a second time just to kind of go through the process again. It takes about 20 minutes. It's really easy. You can do it online. With your kids, it's a little more involved, which makes sense to me because you got to prove that you're the actual guardian. But it's just a great way to protect them. And it makes sense, right? Who would think to check their kids' credit all the time? So the fraudsters know that, and that's why they're such a huge target in that space. One question we've been getting a lot lately has been with Russia, Ukraine. We know there's a lot of threats about cyber attacks. If Russia were to, for example, attack the financial system, I don't think you need to worry about your money. There's FDIC insurance, and that's not where they're going to go after is our money. They're going to go after banks' business disruption, like knocking out ATM machines for 48 hours or causing disruption. Same with the airlines. They're not going to be crashing planes out of the sky. They're going to disrupt reservation systems. One thing to be aware of, if you're someone who's trying to donate to the Ukraine right now, there's a lot of US scammers right now creating false charity companies. So before you make any kind of a donation, whether it's for that or really anything, there's sites that you can go out and check to make sure that, is this a real donation? Only donate via credit card. Don't anything that's asking you to donate via some kind of a gift card is always a big red flag. But unfortunately, scammers know that a lot of people are generous and charitable, and they try to take advantage of that. So that's really the biggest thing that's happening out right now is scams around donations to the Ukraine.
Great. Good point there. We do have a question coming in here. So let's say you freeze your credit and now you need to go take out a loan. What do you do?
So, yeah, great question. Because if you don't do anything, you won't be able to get that loan. It also prevents impulsive buying, I think. But it is easy. What you would do is find out who they work with, which credit bureau. Usually it's one, and then you just unfreeze it. And you will have you will receive a PIN number or a code that you can use to freeze and unfreeze your credit. It used to be sometimes you had to pay to do that, which is kind of obscene. But with that federal legislation we discussed earlier, there is no cost to freeze it or unfreeze it. One thing to keep in mind with the credit freeze, it does not protect like your existing credit cards, okay? So if my credit card gets stolen, could somebody use it? Yes, they could. But it does prevent somebody from opening up new credit, which typically when our social security numbers get stolen, that's what they're going to use it for. So you just simply need to unfreeze it. It's a 1-minute process. You can do it shortly before, and then after they've been able to run the credit, you want to go and you want to refreeze it.
Awesome. I don't see any more questions coming in. Thank you so much again, Jared, for having this very, very informative presentation. I think it's going to save a lot of people if they take in this information and take action steps. We actually do have one last minute question coming in here. What about home title?
That's a great question. I think home title, I don't want to quite call it a scam. I think some of us have heard these ads. They're very threatening, by the way, that someone's going to steal our home. I don't think you need that type of either insurance or protection, because it is true. Somebody could go down and get a deed to our house or create one, but they're not going to be able to do anything with it. If somebody tries to open up a mortgage on our home, you're not going to end up paying that mortgage, and they're not going to be able to take your home from you. Unless this is something that is causing you tons of loss of sleep, it's not something you need. I'm a little surprised that some of these ads have not been even found to be illegal. I know some of the ones, some of us on this call, I'm sure have heard that like your house is under threat. It's simply not true. So that's one thing that I think you don't have to worry about.
Okay, good. And then we got another question. How long does a credit freeze last?
It lasts as long as you leave it up. So that's why when you do one, typically you don't have to really worry about it anymore. It's kind of like, until you go to open up new credit. I froze mine. I haven't had to unfreeze it yet. I haven't opened up any new lines of credit. But once you do unfreeze it, I would be sure you have a reminder to go back and freeze it. Because if you unfreeze it, it's going to stay unfrozen until you refreeze it.
Yep. And actually, I think one of the new features now is you can actually set a time for it to be unfreeze, and so it automatically freezes after a certain number of days or weeks that you set.
You're right.
Um,
Yeah, great point.
so they're making it easier now, which is nice. All right, great. I think that that wraps it up, and we will be with you next month again on the first Wednesday of the month, right here at noon Eastern time, and we will be speaking specifically on extended care planning. Thanks again to Jared, and from Personal Wealth Strategies, Buckingham Strategic Partners. It was great having you here, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thanks.